I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the street below. People bustled by, pushing strollers in front of them, balancing grocery bags, holding their children's hands as they hurried on with their lives. South Burlington, once a sleepy little town, had changed over the years. Developers had bought up the old homes, tearing them down to build sleek, modern complexes. Young families with their fresh hopes and eager eyes were moving in, and Hugo, my son, called it market development. He said it was great for his business, of course. It had been 3 days since I last heard from him. Normally, Hugo called every Sunday between 9 and 10 in the morning. It was like some kind of unspoken rule part of his weekly routine. Sometimes I imagined him scheduling it like an appointment in his diary. Call Mum. 10 minutes. I was 77 now, and I had long since grown used to the silence. Loneliness to me felt like an old plaid sweater worn, a little frayed at the edges, but familiar and somehow comforting. When I was younger, though, loneliness had terrified me. I feared that I might not be able to carry it, that one day it would crush me under the weight of society's whispers. Cordelia Needham, single mom in a small town. The phrase used to sting. It felt like a sentence, a judgment, a life in a box. I pushed myself out of the chair and shuffled over to the bookshelf. There was a small box tucked away there, filled with old photographs. I opened it and smiled softly at the pictures inside. There was Hugo, his face covered in chocolate ice cream, a wide grin lighting up his young face. Then, a picture from his senior year of high school, serious, handsome, standing tall and proud. He looked just like his father, and it still took my breath away every time I saw it. A father who never knew his son existed. I was a math teacher at South Burlington High for 35 years. And when I got pregnant by a visiting architect who was working on the new library project, he refused to acknowledge the child. The principal wanted to fire me, but there was a shortage of math teachers and I was good at what I did. So, I was allowed to stay on the condition that I would serve as a model of morality. I agreed, but honestly, I didn't have much of a choice. Raising Hugo alone was hard. I worked 2 jobs, taught during the day, gave private lessons at night. I only slept 4, maybe 5 hours a night. But I never complained. Hugo was always a bright boy. He started reading early and developed a knack for numbers. I was so proud of him. The shrill sound of the kettle broke my reverie, pulling me back to the present. I made myself some tea and returned to my spot by the window. Across the street, there was a small park where mothers gathered with their children. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of Lucy, my granddaughter, playing with her friends. She never noticed me watching. At 19, I doubted she would have been thrilled to know her grandmother was keeping an eye on her from the window. So I never called her name. I never waved. Finally, the phone rang and I nearly spilled my tea in my lap. It was Diane, Hugo's wife. Cordelia, hello. Her voice was overly cheerful, the kind that usually meant she needed something. How are you feeling? She asked. I'm fine, thank you, I replied, dabbing at the wet spot on my pants. Great. Hugo wanted to talk to you, but he's at a home showing, so he asked me to call. We're having a family dinner on Friday night, 7 o'clock. You're coming, right? I knew it wasn't really a question. Family dinners were rare, and whenever they did happen, there was always something important to discuss. The last one was when Peter went off to law school. Before that, it had been when Hugo got promoted to partner at his real estate agency. Of course, Diane. Can I get you anything? Oh, no. Nothing at all, she laughed, as if I'd made a joke. Just be on time. We have important news. I hung up the phone. My curiosity piqued. What was the news? Could it be that Hugo had finally bought the house he and Diane had been dreaming about for years? It would be a huge step, especially for Hugo, who had always complained about renting. Despite having a good career as a realtor, it was a little embarrassing to still be renting an apartment in a nice neighborhood. He'd often said clients would look at him sideways, questioning why a real estate agent didn't own their own home. I sighed and opened my laptop. It was my little secret. No one in the family knew that at 77, I was more tech-savvy than many of the younger generation. When I retired, I enrolled in a computer course at the local college. At first, it was just out of curiosity, but then it became something more. I enjoyed learning new things. Soon, I was one of the top students in the class. And that's when I discovered the stock market. At first, it was just a game away to fill the endless evenings in an empty apartment. I set aside $1,000 of my savings. Not much, just enough to feel the excitement without risking everything. The first investment. A failure. I lost almost half of it, but instead of giving up, I studied. Charts, company reports, market news. Math had always been my thing, and soon I could see patterns where others saw nothing but chaos. In the last 15 years, my $1,000 had grown to $50,000. I didn't take big risks slow. Steady growth was my approach. I never told anyone about it. Hugo would have laughed at me. Diane would have called it crazy, or worse, a scam. And Peter, he would have asked for money, like he always did. I checked my stock portfolio. Everything was stable except for one position. A small biotech company I had invested in 3 years ago on the advice of someone on an investment forum. Back then, their shares were only $5 apiece, and I bought 1,000 of them. A $5,000 investment. Now, the price had risen to $28 per share, and it kept climbing. Something big was happening. A quick search revealed that the company had announced positive results from a clinical trial of a new drug for Alzheimer's disease. It was a sensation in the medical world, and the stock price soared. I did some quick math. My $5,000 had turned into $28,000. It was a nice profit, but my gut told me this was just the beginning. If the drug worked, the stock could rise even more. On the other hand, if there were doubts about the trial's results, the stock could plummet just as quickly. What should I do? Sell now and lock in my profit, or wait and take my chances? I closed my laptop without making a decision. I had time to think. For now, I had other things to focus on. I had promised to babysit Lucy while Hugo and Diane went out. To some charity event. My granddaughter wasn't a child anymore, of course, but her parents didn't trust her to stay home alone in the evenings. She's irresponsible, Diane said. Unreliable, Hugo echoed. I disagreed with their assessment. Lucy was dreamy, a little distracted, but not irresponsible at all. She just didn't fit the rigid standards her parents had set for her, unlike her brother. Peter, who always knew how to please his father and mother. Lucy stayed true to herself. I respected her for that. Pulling myself together, I left the apartment and walked down to the bus stop. Diane offered to call a cab for Maybew. I declined. I liked riding the bus, watching people, listening to scraps of conversation. It reminded me that I was still part of this world, even if my own family thought I was invisible, only showing up when called when they needed. Arriving at the app meant something. The bus arrived on time, and 20 minutes later I was already ringing the doorbell of Hugo and Diane's apartment. Lucy opened the door with headphones around her neck and a cell phone in her hand. "Hi, Grandma." She pecked me on the cheek and stepped back, letting me inside. Me parents were almost ready in the living room. Diane was in the mirror in her new dress, and Hugo was on the phone pacing back and forth across the room. "Mom." He ended the call and came over to me. "Thanks for coming. We won't be long. We'll be back at 11 o'clock. "It's okay," I smiled. "Have fun, Lucy." Diane looked at her daughter sternly. "No friends, no parties you promised to study for. Your chemistry test." "Yes, Mom." Lucy rolled her eyes when they left. Lucy plopped down on the couch and turned on the TV. Would you like some tea? Grandma, I'd love some. I sat down next to her. Sitting down next to her hose, college going fine. She shrugged. Chemistry is annoying, but it's tolerable. What are your favorite subjects? Lucy perked up. Literature, we're studying 20th century. Poetry now, it's so interesting, and psychology, not the boring part with dates and names. But when we discuss why people do things the way they do, I listened to her chatter, enjoying the rare moment of sincerity. Usually our conversations were superficial, limited by the presence of Hugo and Diane, who didn't approve of idle chatter. Now Lucy was talking about her dreams, her plans, her doubts. She was not at all as her parents had described her. The evening passed quickly, and pleasantly. We watched a comedy on TV, ordered pizza, another thing Diane disapproved of, and talked a lot to my surprise. Lucy asked me about me life when I was young. I rarely talked about the past. It was too painful, too complicated to explain, but today choosing my words carefully something was pushing me to be frank. It wasn't easy. I said choosing my words carefully. I was 25 when I got pregnant with your father. It was almost old maid in those days. But I wasn't in a hurry to get married. I wanted to get on my feet first, get a steady job. What happened to grandfather? Lucy asked. Dad never talks about him. He didn't know about Hugo. I sighed. It was a brief affair when I found out I was pregnant. He'd already left town. I didn't go looking for him. Why not? Pride, I guess, or fear that he wouldn't want the baby. I don't know, Lucy. Sometimes we make decisions that seem right at the time, and then we spend the rest of our lives second-guessing them. She nodded thoughtfully. Were you scared? Raising a child alone, very much so. I smiled at the memory. But joyful too. Your father was a great kid, curious, funny, of course. There were hard times. Money was always a problem, and the judgment of others in those days. Unmarried mothers were considered not very respectable. Money was always a problem. It's so unfair, Lucy said indignantly, as if everything depended only on the woman. Times were different. I shrugged. But you know what kept me going? Math in the field of numbers. Everything was logical, predictable. 2 + 2 always equaled 4, no matter who you were or what others thought of you. Is that why you became a math teacher? Partly also because it was a stable job with good pay and summer vacations, when I could be with Hugo. The sound of the door opening interrupted a conversation. Hugo and Diane were back earlier than promised. Is everything okay? Hugo asked, looking around the room as if he expected to see signs of disaster. Of course. I got up from the couch. We had a great time. Lucy, it's late. Go to bed, Diane commanded. We have to get up early tomorrow. My granddaughter obediently got up, but before she left, she gave me a big hug. Thank you for tonight, Grandma, and for the conversation. I hugged her back, feeling an unexpected warmth in my chest. Don't forget Friday, Mom, Hugo reminded me. I was about to leave family dinner at 7. I remember. I nodded. I'll be on to Median, hailed a cab for me, and 15 minutes later I was home. The apartment was quiet, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel oppressive. The evening with Lucy had reminded me that I could still needed that. I could still be interesting, that my life and experiences mattered. Before I went to bed, I opened my laptop again and checked the biotech company stock. They were up another $3. My fortune was growing, and with it grew my confidence in the future. I was no longer invisible, at least to myself. The morning began with a phone call. I hadn't even had time to drink my first coffee when my cell phone beeped. The number was unfamiliar, and I hesitated when my cell phone beep had. Before answering, lately there had been an increase in calls from scammers preying on the elderly. Cordelia needed a man's voice said when I answered the phone. Yes, that's me. My name is Edward Gillespie. I represent the brokerage company, Atlas Investments. I apologize for the early call, but I have news that can't wait. I'm wary. I used an online platform for my investments and had never dealt with real brokers. What's the news? I asked, cautiously. Mrs. Neve, you hold shares in Bayanov, correct? Yes, I confirmed, still not sure where he was going with this last night. It was announced that Bayernov would be taken over by the pharmaceutical giant Pharma. The deal is valued at $4 billion. Pharma is buying back all shares at $500 apiece. I felt the room swim before my eyes. $500 a share, I had 1,000 shares. Is this a joke? My voice trembled. No, Mrs. Needham, this is absolutely. I felt the room swim. Serious. Our company noticed your position and decided to contact you directly to help formalize the deal. You have won 0 shares, which translates to $500,000 before taxes. I slumped back in my chair, my legs refusing to hold me up. $500,000, $500,000 an amount. I couldn't even imagine what do I need to do, I asked, trying to collect my thoughts. The deal will close in 2 weeks. You don't have to do anything until then. After the closing, the money will be transferred to your account. If you have any questions or need help with tax planning, I'll leave my number, and let me congratulate you on a successful investment, Mrs. Needham. I thanked him, wrote down the number, and hung up the phone, and sat motionless for a long time, staring into the space in front of me. $500. 0. I couldn't fathom that figure. I had never made that much in my entire couldn't fathom that figure. Working life, my first impulse was to call Hugo and tell him, but something stopped me. I had to think it over first, decide what to do with that much money. I made myself some coffee and sat by the window watching the city wake up. $500. 0. What could I do with it? Travel. At my age, it's not so easy to get off the ground anymore. Buy a new apartment. Why, I was happy with mine. Put it in a bank account. At today's interest rates, it seemed like a waste of opportunity. And then it hit me. A house. I could buy a house for Hugo and his family. For years now, Hugo had been talking about the importance of having his own place. Mom, you have no idea how humiliating it is to sell other people's houses when you're living in a rented apartment yourself, he complained. Ian dreamed of a big kitchen and a backyard for barbecues. They'd been saving for a down payment, that something always got in the way. The car broke down. Peter needed money for school, or Lucy. I pictured their face. Decided to change colleges. I pictured their faces when I told them I was buying them a house. All of it. No mortgage. Hugo would be shocked. Diane would finally stop looking down on Mabe. They'll even start inviting me over more often, not just when they need help. Encouraged by that thought, I opened my laptop and went to the website of the real estate agency where Hugo worked. I knew the kind of house they liked, the Victorian mansion on Maple Street. They'd shown me in pictures 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a backyard with century-old oak trees. The price was $480. Oh, I almost laughed at the coincidence. It was as if fate was pushing me toward this decision. With the remaining $20,000, I could buy new furniture or pay for repairs. The phone rang again. This time it was Hugo. Mom, do you remember about dinner tomorrow night? He asked, without preamble. Of course I remember, I answered. 7 o'clock. That's good, it's important. Mom, we're having a serious conversation. Is of course. I remember something wrong. I'm worried. No, nothing bad. It's just, a family material. See you tomorrow. He hung up before I could say I had news too. Maybe it's for the best. I wanted to see their faces when I told them about my gift. I spent the rest of the day researching the house on Maple Street. I found more pictures. Read the description. Evan looked at the neighborhood on a map. It was the perfect place, close to a good school. Though Peter and Lucy were grown near a park in a quiet, respectable neighborhood. In the evening, Diane called Cordelia, could you come in an hour early tomorrow? I wanted to ask you to help set table. I know you're better at it than I am. It was obvious flattery. Diane knew how to set a table, having grown up in a family that hosted receptions for important guests. But, I said, yes, of wonderful, she used that course. Diane, I'll be there at 6. Wonderful, she used that exaggeratedly, her tone again. And, Cordelia, wear something dressy. It's going to be a special evening. I wondered what that could mean. Maybe they did have good news. Maybe Hugo had gotten a promotion, or Peter had finally found a job after law school. Either way, my news would overshadow everything else. I woke up the next day with a sense of celebration for the first time in years. I felt significant, able to do something important for my family. I imagined how surprised they would be, how Hugo would probably tear up, though he hated to show weakness. How Diane would finally recognize that I wasn't just a burden. It pulled my best dress out of my closet. A navy blue long-sleeved one that hid my skinny arms. I put on pearl earrings, a 50th birthday present from my students. I arranged my grey hair in a simple but elegant style. I looked at myself in thigh, put on pearl earrings mirror, and was pleased for a woman of 77. I looked good at 6 o'clock. Rang the doorbell of Hugo and Diane's apartment. Peter, my grandson, opened the door. He was home for the weekend from his college, which was 3 hours away. Hi, Grandma. He hugged me awkwardly, and I could smell beer on his clothes come on in my parents. Are in the kitchen. I walked into the living room, where Lucy sat with her phone in her hands. Hi, Grandma. She looked up and smiled. You're so dressed up today. Thank you, darling. Your mom said it was going to be a special night. Lucy rolled her eyes. Yeah. They've been running around all day, some kind of important family reunion. I was about to ask if Shek knew what it was, but Diane came out of the kitchen wearing an apron over an elegant black dress. Cordelia, your hero. Could you help me set up? I ordered new china, and it's so fragile I'm afraid I'll break it. I followed her into the kitchen where Hugo was working on some kind of sauce. Mom, he nodded at me. You look good, thank I. Followed here, you son. I kissed him on the cheek, something I hadn't done in years. He looked at me in surprise, but didn't say anything. I spent the next hour helping Diane set the plates, arrange the utensils, and fill the glasses. She had indeed bought a new set, white with a thin gold border, very expensive looking for special occasions, she explained, noticing my gaze. It was just like this one today at 7 o'clock. We all sat down at the table. Hugo opened a bottle of champagne, real French champagne, not the soda he usually bought at Christmas. Before we begin, he said, filling our glasses, I want to say that today is an important day for our family. I felt my heart beat faster. Maybe he'd somehow found out about my winnings, but how Diane and I have been working on this for a long time, and it finally worked out. Hugo continued, taking his wife's hand. We found the perfect house for our I almost dropped my fork family. I almost dropped my fork. They'd already bought the house, but where did they get the money from? A Victorian mansion on Maple Street, Diane said with a bright smile, the one we dreamed of, thievery house I was going to give them. I felt my face burn. But how did you buy it? I asked, trying to hide my confusion. It cost almost $500,000. Hugo and Diane looked at each other. Well, we haven't bought it yet, Hugo explained. But we've put down a deposit, but with the down payment we're going to need some help with that. He looked at me and I finally realized what this dinner was all about. Mom, Hugo stepped forward, his voice soft, almost ingratiating. We've been thinking about the best way to proceed, and we've come to the conclusion that it's time for all of us to move on. What do you mean? I asked, though, too. Already knew your apartment, already knew your apartment. Mum, it's too big for you alone, and it's too well, there's a lot of stairs, old wiring. It's not safe at your age. My apartment was on second floor, only one flight of stairs, and I'd only replaced the wiring 5 years ago. But I kept quiet, letting him continue. We found a great place for you, son. Terraces is a retirement community. It has excellent facilities, medical staff around the clock, organized leisure activities, and most importantly, you will be among your peers. Boarding house, I repeated slowly. You mean a nursing home? No, Diane interjected quickly. It's a residence for the elderly, very modern, with a swimming pool and a library. How much does it cost? I asked, feeling a cold rage growing inside me. Not cheap, Hugo admitted. But if you sold your apartment, you'd have enough money to live there for a few years. And we could use part of it for a down payment on Lucy gave her daughter a warning house. It would be a win-win for everyone. Everybody benefits. Each of Grandma could live with us, Lucy said suddenly. There are 4 bedrooms in the new house, plenty of room. Lucy Diane gave her daughter a warning look. We've talked about this, Yawa. Grandmother will have her own needs that we won't be able to fulfill. Sun Terraces will have professionals taking care of her. Come on, Mom, Peter interjected, pouring himself a second helping of mashed potatoes. Just tell it like it is. You don't want the old lady messing around in your fancy new house, Peter. Hugo shushed him. Watch your mouth. But Peter just grinned and continued eating. Mom, Hugo turned to me again, his voice even softer. We're only thinking of your welfare. You're 77. You're not getting any younger. What happens if you fall and can't make a phone call or forget to turn off the stove, or I'm still in my right mind, Hugo? I interrupted him. I'm perfectly capable of interrupted him taking care of myself. No one's saying you're not sane. You're not sane on my shoulder, but age takes its toll. My aunt didn't want to move to a boarding house either. And then she loved it so much, she wished she'd done it sooner. I looked at me son and his wife in silence. Everything was becoming clear. They needed my money. The money from the sale of the apartment to buy their dream house, and they wanted to send me to live out my days among other old people out of sight, not to spoil the picture of their perfect life. Have you been to Sun Terrace before? I asked. Of course. Hugo nodded. We even picked out a room for you overlooking the garden. A room? Nodded. Not an apartment. Well, it's a compact space. Diane smiled nervously. But it's very cozy. And it's all set up for the elderly, the handrails in the bathroom, the nurse call button. How many people live in a room like that? I kept asking questions, even though I already knew the answers. You'll be alone. Mummy kept asking questions. Hugo began to lose patience. This isn't a hospital. It's a residence for elderly people who want to be active, but need a little help. What about my stuff, furniture, books? Well, Diane hesitated. Their room isn't that big, of course, but the essentials can be taken. What about Therist? We could sell it, Hugo suggested, or we could store it in the basement of their new house, which you'll buy with the money from the sale of my apartment. I finished for him. There was an awkward silence. Peter hummed and poured himself more wine. Lucy looked down at her plate, avoiding my gaze. Mom, Hugo sighed. I know this isn't an easy decision, but think about the future. Our future together. This apartment is your only asset when you're gone. It'll still pay us. Wouldn't it be better to use that money now when it could benefit the whole family? I wanted to laugh and hiss about the money. I planned to face my only asset. If only he knew about the 500. That was about to drop into me account about the money I planned to spend on them, the house they dreamed of, but I held back. Something told me this wasn't the time to reveal my cards and need to think about it. I said, setting my fork aside. This is a big decision, of course. Mom, Hugo visibly relaxed, thinking. I was inclined to agree, but didn't take too long. The owners of the house gave us a month to collect the down payment, or they'll sell it to other buyers. I understand, I nodded. Give me a week. Diane was clearly not happy, but we wanted to start the paperwork on Monday. Diane, Hugo stopped her. Mom's right. She needs time. A week is a reasonable amount of time. The rest of dinner was spent in strained conversation about the weather, politics, and the latest news in town. Peter told a few stories from law school. Lucy, when dinner was over, reluctantly shared her academic success, but I barely listened. My mind was spinning with thoughts of the upcoming 500 and what I was going to do with it. When dinner was over, Hugo called a cab for me, despite my protests that I could take the bus. It's late, Mom. The buses don't run very often already after all. Lucy caught up with me and whispered, Grandma, I don't want you to go to that boarding house. If you want, I can help you find another place to live. I hugged my granddaughter and kissed her on the cheek. Thank you, sweetie. But don't worry. I'll manage at home. I couldn't sleep for a long time. It was like a kaleidoscope of images. Hugo and Diane planning to put me in a nursing home. Their hypocritical smile. Sam talk of my good. Peter cynical and straightforward, saying what the other tried to hide behind pretty words. And Lucy the only one who genuinely cared about me and the $500. That would soon be in my account. Money that could money That could change everything. I got out of bed and walked to the window. South Burlington winkled with lights at night. Somewhere out there on Maple Street stood the house. Hugo and Diane had dreamed of the house. I was going to give them now. I had other plans. I got a call this morning from Edward Gillespie of Atlas Investments. Mrs. Needham, I have good news. The deal is closing sooner than we expected. The money will be in your account by Friday. That soon? I didn't see that coming. Yeah, it's going faster than planned. Meaty Farmer is rushing to closeth. Deal by the end of the quarter. You'll just need to sign a few documents. I can have them couriered this afternoon, okay? I agreed. I'll be home after the conversation. I sat for a long time thinking about the situation. It had been 3 days since the family dinner, and Hugo had already called twice asking if I had made a decision. I told him I was still thinking, and he got more and more apple pie impatient. Mom, time is of the essence, he said during the last call. The Hermanas have already gotten another offer. We might miss the chance. I knew the pressure would only get worse. Thursday, Hugo invited me to another family dinner on Friday. We need to finalize things, Mom. He said, Diane, you did your favorite apple pie from that bakery on Church Street. Apple pie, my ass. As if dessert could tempt me to give them my apartment and spend the rest of my life in a compact room in a nursing home. The courier brought peppers. At 2:00 in the afternoon, I scrutinized them carefully, reading the fine print. Several times everything was in order. After signing the papers, the money would be deposited into my account the following Friday. $500. Oh, minus taxes, but still a huge sum. I signed the papers and gave them to the courier. The deed was done now. I had to decide what to do next. At first what to do. Next thought of just refusing their offer and leaving everything as it was. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt bitter and disappointed. My own son, whom I had raised alone through hardship and judgment, now wanted to send me to a nursing home to take possession of my apartment. How long had he been hatching this plan? How long had he and Diane been discussing how to get rid of his old mother? And what did they say about me behind my back? That I was a burden, an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. I pulled an old jewelry box out of the closet where I kept important documents among. Then was my bank's checkbook. I rarely used it. Most payments are done electronically these days, but it might come in handy. Now I filled out a check for $500. Zero made out to Hugo Needham, isn't it? And put it in an envelope that I put in my purse. I hadn't decided if I was going to give it to him, but I wanted to be prepared on Friday. I spent a few hours getting ready for dinner. I wore my getting ready for dinner best dress, a dark green one that accentuated my still green eyes. I styled me hair, even put on a little makeup, something I hadn't done in years. It was an important night, and I didn't want to look old and useless, but dignified. At 6:30 I was already at the door of their apartment. Diane opened the door wearing a simple black dress that I knew cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. Cordelia, you look great today, she said with surprise. Come on in, everyone's here. In the living room, Hugo was on the phone. As usual, Peter was lying on the sofa staring at his Fenelisi was sitting in a chair with a book, the only one actually doing anything worth Willa Grander. Lucy jumped up and hugged me. You look amazing. Thank you, dear. I smiled at her. I decided to make a special effort today. Hugo finished talking and came over to me. Mom, it's good to see you. Give me a brief hug. Is everything okay? Yes, Hugo, everything is fine, I replied. Dinner time with a smile. Good, he nodded. Tonight we're finally going to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. Diane made an amazing dinner. I'm looking forward to it, I said. Peter finally got off the phone and gave me a lazy nod. Hi, Grandma. Hello, Peter. I sat down next to him. How's law school going? It's okay, he shrugged. Boring, but okay. Peter is in the top 10 of his class, Hugo said proudly. He has a great future if I don't die of boredom sooner, Peter muttered, but quietly enough so his father wouldn't hear. Diane called everyone to the table. She'd really done her best: roast beef, mashed potatoes, fresh salad, and of course, Apple pie for dessert, as Hugo had promised. The first 20 minutes of dinner passed in relatively peaceful conversation. Hugo talked about a new project, an apartment complex on the outskirts of the city, where his agency would be the exclusive dessert. Time sales representative Diane shared her plans for updating the interior of their future home. Peter made occasional cynical comments, and Lucy was mostly silent, casting concerned glances at me. So, Mom? Hugo finally got to the main topic when dessert was served. Have you made your decision? I slowly set my fork aside. I've given it a lot of thought, Hugo. He stepped forward. Diane froze beside him. Tell me again about this nursing home. I asked, son. Terrace, right? It's not a nursing home, Mom. Hugo immediately corrected me. It's a residence for active seniors, of course. I nodded. Tell me more about it. Hugo enthusiastically began to describe delights of Sun Terrace, the common spaces for recreation, the cultural program, the medical staff, the delicious and healthy food. Diane chimed in and added details. They had clearly rehearsed this speech. And all this for how much a month? I asked, when Hugo paused. About $4,000, he admitted grudgingly. But if I sold your apartment, I'd have enough money to live on for a few years, and then, well, we'll figure something out. What kind of something? I asked straight out. Mom, let's not talk about that right now. First we have to decide about the house and moving into the residence home. Much do you expect to get for my apartment? At current prices, about $350. Oh, Hugo answered. Your neighborhood is booming and demand is high. And how much of that money would go toward a down payment on your house? There was an awkward pause. We were thinking about $200,000. Hugo finally said that should be now for a good down payment. The rest would pay for your stay at Sun Terraces. I did some quick math. $150,000 with a monthly payment of $4,000 is a little over 3 years. And then what? And what happens in 3 years when the money runs out? Mom, a lot of things can change in 3 years. Hugo answered evasively. We'll earn more money. Maybe we'll sell this house and another, or grandmother will be dead by then, and the problem will solve itself. Peter said suddenly, as he poured himself a second portion of pie. Peter, Diane exclaimed, giving him a fiery look. What? He shrugged. Let's be honest. Granny's 77. How much longer is she going to last? 5 years. 7. If she's lucky. That's why you're in a hurry to sell the apartment. You want to get the money while she's still alive. I'm not going to let you say that. Hugo slammed his fist on the table, apologized to Grandma. Right, no, for what? For telling the truth. Peter grinned. That's what everyone here thinks. I'm just the only one who isn't afraid to say it. Peter, please. Lucy said quietly. It's not nice. Your grandma's protector now. Peter turned to his sister. It's not nice. Aren't you interested in the money from the sale of her apartment? Or do you expect the old lady to leave you something in her will? That's enough. Hugo got up from the table. Peter, go to your room. Now I'm 23, Dad. Peter rolled his eyes. You can't send me to my room like awkward. As long as you're living on my money, I can do a lot more. Hugo loomed over his son. Go to your room. Peter smirked, but stood up. Whatever you say, Daddy. I don't want to interfere with your plans to get rid of old and useless Granny. Diane let out a gasp. Lucy lowered her head, her cheeks flushed with shame. Hugo stood there not knowing what to say, and I felt strangely relieved. Finale Samin had said out loud what everyone was thinking. My grandson's cynical and tackles, but at least honest. Peter spoke calmly. Come here. Please, Mom, there's no need to. Hugo began. But it's a real check. Stopped him with a gesture. I want to say something to my grandson. I said firmly. Peter, come here. Peter reluctantly returned to the table. Yes, Grandma. I opened my purse, took out an envelope, and held it out to Peter. What's this? He took the envelope suspiciously. Open it, and you'll find out. Peter opened it. Envelope and pulled out a check. His eyes widened when he saw the number. Amount? What's $500? Is this a joke? No, it's not a joke. I shook my head. This is Ariel check for real money. Hugo grabbed the check out of his son's hands and stared at it. Mom, where did you get that kind of money? Is this a prank? Is it a fake? It's a real check, Hugo. I have $500. 0 in my account. It's from the sale of some biotech stock. I bought 3 years ago stock. Diane looked from to the check and back again. What stock do you play? The stock market, not gambling. Investing, I corrected her. 15. What stock do you play? Years. Now quite successful, as you can see. There was silence in the room. Even Peter seemed shocked. I was planning to give you a gift. I continued to buy that house on Maple Street. You've been dreaming of all of it mortgage-free. A surprise for Hugo's birthday. Oh my God, Mom. Hugo looked stunned. Why didn't you say anything? I wanted it to be a surprise, I shrugged. But now, I have other plans. Other plans? Hugo asked, still holding the check. Like what? I plan to travel. I said I've always wanted to see Europe, maybe Asia, Africa. I have enough money to do what I want and live the life I like, but what about home? Diane looked like she was about to cry. Put down a deposit. We could lose it. That's your problem, Diane. I smiled gently at her. You're adults. You'll figure something out. Maybe ask Hugo's parents for money. Oh no, I'm all he's got. You're old and useless. And I was going to help, but now, as Peter said, I'm old and useless. I have no reason to waste money on people who don't appreciate me, Mom. That's not what Peter meant. Hugo tried to salvage the situation. He just said something stupid. We all appreciate and love you very much, so much, so that you want to send me to a nursing home and take my apartment. I nodded. Yes, I can feel your love. Hug a grandma. Lucy spoke softly. I never thought you were useless, and I'm glad you have the money to fulfill your dreams. I smiled at her. Thank you, darling. You know, you're not like them. Look. Mom. Hugo sat down next to me. His voice soft, persuasive. Let's forget all this talk about Sun Terrace. It's obvious you don't belong there. You're in great shape. You have a clear mind, and you're rich. That's amazing. We could think together about the best use of that money. Maybe we could buy a house, but a big one. So we could think together that you could have a place there. Hugo, I stopped him. Give me back the check. Wait, blink the check. It's mine. I changed my mind. Hugo reluctantly handed that check back to me. I carefully put it back in the envelope. But Mom, Diane interjected, her voice trembling. You're not just going to leave, are you? What about us? A family has to stick together. Family, Diane. I looked at her. Where was this family when you were planning to put me in a nursing home? Where was this family when you were deciding what to do with my apartment? Where was this family for the last 10 years? When you only thought of me when you needed a free babysitter or a payday loan? Mom, that's not fair. Hugo shook his head. We've always taken care of you. No, Hugo, I got up from the table. You took care of yourself, and that's okay. Everyone does. Everyone does. That's it, but don't cover up your selfishness with pretty words about family. So you're just going to leave? U.S. Diane couldn't believe her plan was falling apart after everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? Diane, I asked with genuine curiosity. Remind Mesh opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything exactly. I nodded. Nothing. I don't blame you. You have your own life, your own worries, but I have my own life now and my own plans. Grandma. Lucy came over to me. I'm going to miss you. Me too, dear. I hugged her. But I won't disappear forever. I'll send you postcards from different countries, and maybe someday you'll be able to come visit me. Let's not be dramatic, Peter snorted. Granny is just blackmailing us. She's not going anywhere. What makes you think that? I looked at my grandson. Because you're old. He shrugged. Old people don't travel the world. They sit at home and complain about arthritis. You know, Peter. I smiled. Mom, wait at him. Someday you'll be old too, and maybe you'll realize that age is just a number, and what really makes a man old is the absence of dreams. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Mom, wait. Hugo came after me. We can't break up like this. Let's talk about this calmly. We've already talked about it. Hugo, I turned around. You wanted to solve your problems at my expense. It didn't work. No, you're going to have to find other ways. But what are we going to do about the house? Diane asked desperately. Willis, the deposit. That's not my problem. Diane, I shrugged. I'm old and useless. Remember, how can I help? Cordelia, please. Diane came toward me, her voice pleading. Let's start over. We were wrong about the nursing home. It was a terrible idea. But we could buy a house together, a big house with enough room for all of us. And where I'd live in a little room on the first floor so I wouldn't be in your way. It was a terrible idea. Shook my head. No. Diane, I appreciate the attempt, but my mind is made up. I didn't believe you're going to leave Hugo. Crossed his arms over his chest. You've always been a homebody. You never liked Totterville because I've never had the opportunity. I smiled. I had responsibilities, work, you then grandchildren. Now I'm free. And I have money. Maybe for the first time in my life I can do what I want to do, not what I have to do. That's selfish, Diane exclaimed. I laughed. Yes, Diane, it is selfish, but you know what, at my age I've earned the right to be selfish. I opened door. No one tried to stop me. Peter went back to his phone. Diane stood with her hands covering her face. Hugo looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Only Lucy looked genuinely upset. Goodbye, I said. Don't see me off. And I walked out, closing the door behind me. It was only when I was outside that I realized I was smiling It was only when I was outside first time in a long time I felt alive. Not just existing, but truly alive, with plans, dreams, possibilities. I was walking through evening South Burlington, and it felt like I was a few decades lighter. Maybe Peter was right. I really am old, but I didn't feel useless anymore. I had money and dreams and a whole world waiting for me. And it was wonderful. I didn't call a cab, even though it was getting late. I wanted to walk, clear my head. It was about 2 miles to my house, but the weather was warm and I was in no hurry. I needed time to process everything that had happened on the way. I stopped at a convenience store and bought a bottle of good red wine. I hardly ever drank alcohol, but tonight was a special night and evening when my life took an unexpected turn at home. He changed into a comfortable robe, opened the wine, and sat by the window. South Burlington was twinkling with lights, living its usual Friday night life. People were coming home after the work. I changed into a comfortable robe. Week young people were going to bars and clubs. Families were dining in restaurants, and I sat alone in my apartment with a glass of wine and $500. Zero in my account. What am I supposed to do with this money, with this sudden freedom? I could just leave it at that, live in my apartment, occasionally socialize with my grandchildren if Hugo and Diane would let me after today, continue my investments. A quiet, measured life until the end. But is that what I dreamed of when I was young? Is that what I survived all the hardships, betrayals, disappointments for when I was 20? I dreamed of seeing the world. I read dozens of books about faraway lands, cut out pictures of exotic places from magazines, and kept them in a special album. I planned to travel after Collega Mabe, a year or two before settling down and starting a career. But then I met him, Richard Howard, an architect from Boston. I met Richard Howard had come to South Burlington for a new library project. He was handsome, educated, charming. He told me about the cities he'd been to, the buildings he designed. He promised to show me Europe, Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Our affair lasted only 3 months. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared. He just didn't show up for the meeting or answer his phone. A week later, I found out he was back in Boston. Another month later, a friend showed me a newspaper article about his wedding to the daughter of a prominent businessman. I didn't go looking for him. My pride wouldn't let me. I decided I could do it on my own, and I did. I raised Hugo, gave him an education, helped him get back on his feet. But my dreams of traveling remained dreams until now. Now I had money and time, new obligations, no need to take care of anyone, just me and a whole world waiting to be discovered. I stood up and pulled an old box from the top shelf of my closet. It held things I hadn't pulled out in years: photos, letters, magazine, my scrapbook of dreams, clippings. My scrapbook of dreams. I opened it and began flipping through the yellowed pages. The Eiffel Tower at sunset, the Roman Colosseum, Venetian canals, Greek islands with white houses and blue roofs, Egyptian pyramids, India's Taj Mahal. Once these places seemed as unattainable as the stars in the sky. Now they were an airplane ticket away. I imagined waking up in a Paris hotel, walking out onto the balcony, and seeing the Eiffel Tower in front of me, drinking coffee In a small cafe in St. Mark's Square in Venice. How I wander through narrow streets of Barcelona, looking at Gaudí's bizarre buildings, but there was another dream one that I never told Anione about, the dream of a house by the sea. A small, cozy house with a veranda overlooking the ocean, a place where you could watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee, listening to the sound of the waves, and watch the sunset with a glass of wine. On the last page of the album, a young girl's naive dreams was a clipping from an old magazine, a picture of a white beach house somewhere in Greece or Spain. I had looked at it when I was pregnant with Hugo and imagined that someday we would live in such a place, me, him, and his father. A young girl's naive dreams. The phone rang, snapping me out of my memories. I looked at the screen. Hugo. I didn't answer it. Whatever he had to say could wait until tomorrow. Today I wanted to be alone with me thoughts. A minute later, a message came through. Mom, we need to talk. Please call me back. I disconnected the phone. Hugo and his problems could wait. $500. Zero wouldn't solve all my problems, but it could give me what I dreamed of all my life, freedom. I finished my winning, went to bed, but I couldn't sleep for a long time. My mind was spinning with thoughts of the future, of possibilities, of countries I could visit, of people I could meet, and for the first time in many years, I felt not fear of tomorrow in the morning, but anticipation in the morning. I was awakened by the doorbell. I looked at the clock. 9:30. Who could have come so early on a Saturday? Putting on my robe, I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Lucy was standing on the doorstep with a large paper bag in her hands. I opened the door. Lucy, what are you doing here? So early. Hi, Grandma. She smiled, a little embarrassed. I brought breakfast, croissants from that French bakery you like, and coffee. I let her inside. Do your parents know you're here? No. She shook her head. They think I'm out for my morning run. Can I stay for a while? Sure, I nodded. Give me 5 minutes to wash up and get dressed. When I returned, Lucy had already set up croissants, jam, and 2 glasses of coffee on the kitchen table. I remember you like almonds, she said, pointing to one of the croissants. Thank you, dear. I sat down across from Harry, could see. That's very nice of you. We began to eat our breakfast in silence. I could see that Lucy wanted to say something, but didn't dare. Is everything all right? I asked at last. Grandma? She looked up at me. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. For what? Peter said, and for the way Mom and Dad acted. You have nothing to apologize for, Lucy. I smiled softly. It wasn't your fault, but I'm still ashamed. She shook her head. What they were planning to do to you. It's awful. And Peter, I don't understand how I could say those things. Peter just voiced what everyone was thinking. I shrugged in a way. He's the most honest of you all. I didn't think so, Lucy. Was indignant. I never thought you were older, useless. I know, darling. I covered her hand with mine. You've always been special, more like me than like your parents. She smiled weakly. Daddy always says I took after you, not usually as a compliment. Hugo was always practical. Aside, even as a kid, always knew what he wanted and how to get it sometimes. I think he's more like his father than he is like me. You never told me about your grandfather, Lucy said carefully. What was he like? Handsome? I smiled. At the memory. Charming. Had a way of talking that made you believe every word he said. And irresponsible. Disappeared when he found out I was pregnant. That's terrible. Lucy frowned. How could he do that? People often don't act the way we expect them to. I shrugged. Especially when it comes to responsibility and commitment. Your grandfather wasn't ready to be a father. Probably didn't even know he really had become one. I never told him. I was keeping the baby in those days. A lot of girls in my position had abortions or gave their children up for adoption. But you decided to keep Daddy. Lucy looked at me thoughtfully. It must have been very hard, though difficult is not the word. Lucy looked at me thoughtfully for it. I grinned. It was almost impossible. A single mom in a small town in the 60s. I was an outcast. My own family turned their backs on me. I lost many friends. I had to fight to keep my job at the school. But I never once regretted my decision. You're very strong. Grandma. Lucy looked at me with admiration. Now I understand why you were so angry with Dad and Mom after all you've done for them. It's not about gratitude. Lucy, I shook my head. I didn't expect Hugo to thank me forever for raising him. That's my responsibility as a mother, but I did expect respect. I expected him to see me as a person, not a problem to be solved. Lucy nodded, keeping her eyes on me. What are you going to do with the money and everything? I haven't decided yet, I smiled. But I have a few ideas. Maybe I'll actually go traveling, or buy a small house somewhere by the sea. That sounds great. Lucy smiled. That sounds great, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. I'll miss you. Me too, darling. I squeezed her hand, but we'll keep in touch, and who knows? Maybe you can come visit me during the vacations, really. Her eyes lit up. I'd really like that, of course. I nodded. After all, what good is money if you don't spend it on the people you love? Lucy was silent for a moment, rubbing her napkin. Grandma can I ask you something, Sha? Are you really going to leave for good? Or was that just to teach Dad and Mom a lesson? I thought about her question. Was I really ready to drop everything and start a new life at my age? Or was it just a moment of anger, a desire to get back at Hugo and Diane for their plan to send me to a nursing home? I don't know yet, Lucy, I answered earnestly. Part of me really wants to go away to see the world, to live for myself for a little while. But another part, easy answered, honestly, afraid. After all, I'm 77 years old. It's not the right age to make drastic changes. I think you should do what makes you happy, Lucy said seriously. If it means leaving here, what about college, your friends, your life here? I'm doing fine. She shrugged. I don't particularly like college, to be honest. I chose it because my dad insisted, but it's not what I want. What do you want? I asked curiously. I don't know exactly, Lucy sighed. Maybe writing or taking pictures or traveling like you to see the world before I decide what I want to be. I looked at my granddaughter with a new understanding. She was so much like me at her age, full of dreams and aspirations, but limited by familiar expectations, you know? I smiled. Maybe we should both take a trip, if only for a short time, see the world together. Really, her eyes widened. Would you take me with you? Why? Eyes widened. I shrugged. I could use the company and help with the heavy suitcases, Lucy Lord. But then her face turned serious again. What would Dad and Mom say? You're 19, Lucy. I reminded her. You're a grown woman. They can't tell you not to. They can stop paying for college. She said quietly, Are you sure you want to keep going there? I asked. She shook her head. Not really, no. But I don't know what else to do. You have time to think about it. I smiled softly. And so do I. Let's not make any rash decisions. I have to take care of my business first. And then we can talk about your future. Lucy nodded, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Was hoping for an immediate solution, a magical way out of a situation she felt miserable in. But life is rarely that simple. Grandma, Lucy was suddenly serious. I want you to know something, Grandma. Lucy was suddenly serious about Mom and Dad. What's that? I was worried. They don't need the money as much as they say they do. She lowered her eyes. Dad got a promotion 3 months ago. He's a senior partner at the agency now, and his salary has doubled, and Mom got a job at a design firm. They could save up for a down payment on a house if they really saved, but they'd rather spend the money on other things. What? Other things? I felt a chill growing inside. A new car for Daddy. Have you seen his new Audi? It cost 70. A vacation in the Maldives where they went in February. But they told you it was a business trip, membership to the country club they joined last month, and a bunch of other stuff. I was silent, digesting the information Hugo and Diane had lead to me about their financial situation. They could well afford the house, but they'd chosen to try to use my money to avoid spending their own. I shouldn't have told you. Lucy looked guilty, but after yesterday, I just want you to know the truth. They're not poor, they're just greedy. Thank you for being honest, Lucy. I squeezed her hand. It explains a lot. Are you angry? She looked at me with concern. No, I shook my head. I'm disappointed but not surprised. Hugo had always been like that, wanting to get the most with the least as a child. It seemed entrepreneurial now. I see it's just selfishness, and Peter is the same. Lucy sighed. Even worse. He's always asking them for money, But he never thanks them. He thinks they owe him the apple of the tree, I smiled. Sadly, children often take on the worst traits of their parents. I hope I'm not like that. Lucy looked at me with concern. Dear, I stroked her cheek. You're not like that at all, and I'm proud of you. We finished our coffee, and Lucy started to get ready. I have to go, she said regretfully. My parents will be looking for me. Sure, I nodded. Thanks for breakfast and for talking to me, Can I come to your place? She asked me at the door. Before you leave, of course. Lucy hugged her. You're always welcome in my house. When she left, I went back into the kitchen and started clearing the table. The conversation with Lucy had given me a lot of food for thought. That Hugo and Diane had lied about their financial situation wasn't surprising, but it was disappointing and made me wonder how much more dishonest they'd been with me. The phone I turned on this morning showed 7 missed calls from Hugo and 3 from Diane, several messages asking them to call them back. I didn't prefer to do that. I needed time to think about my next steps. I pulled out my old scrapbook again and started flipping through it. All these places, all these possibilities. Could I really start a new life at 77? Or was this just a fantasy, a way to escape reality? Could I really start a new life? And the last page of my scrapbook next to a picture of a house by the sea. I hadn't written a quote that seemed important to me at the time. It's never too late to become what you could have been. Reread those words and felt something inside me shift. Maybe it really is never too late. Maybe my life doesn't end at 77, but just begins a new chapter of it. I walked over to my computer and opened my browser. It was time to explore the possibilities I now had. It was time to make a new plan, not for Hugo, not for my grandchildren, but for myself. The decision didn't come immediately. I spent several days researching options, ranging from traveling around the world to moving to another country. I looked at real estate websites in coastal towns, read reviews of senior travel destinations, and calculated expenses and possible income. Hugo continued to call every day, but I didn't answer. Instead, I sent him a short Hugo continued to call message. I need some time. Please don't bother me yet. He didn't listen, of course. He kept calling and texting. But I was adamant. On the 4th day after that memorable dinner, I made a decision. I would not leave South Burlington, at least not yet. This town had been my home for nearly 60 years. Here I knew every street, every alley. Here were my few friends, my memories, my life. But I wasn't going to stay in my apartment. It was comfortable, but too closely tied to the past, to years of loneliness, to waiting me the phone, to rare visits from my son and grandchildren. I decided to buy a house, not a huge mansion like the one Hugo and Diane had dreamed of, but a small, cozy house with a garden, a place where I could spend time outdoors, grow flowers, have guests if I ever had any. That same day, I contacted a realtor. Not from the Hugo agency, of course. A nice woman named Veronica listened to my wishes and promised to find several options. A garden, I emphasized, and preferably in the South Hill neighborhood. South Hill was the greenest part of South Burlington, with beautiful parks and quiet streets. The neighborhood was considered upscale, but not as expensive as North Heights, where the city's wealthiest families lived. 2 days later, Veronica showed me 3 houses. The first was too big and needed major repairs. The second was too close to the noisy road, and the third was exactly what I was looking for. It was a small 1-story colonial-style house built in the 50s, but recently renovated. 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room with a fireplace, a cozy kitchen, and most importantly, a lovely garden with apple trees, flower beds, and an old gazebo covered with wild grapes. It's perfect, I say to Veronica as we walked around the house and garden. How much are the owners asking? $380. Oh, she said. But I think they'll settle for $360. The house has been on the market for 2 months. I'll give them $3,605 if they agree to a quick deal. I decided no mortgage, full payment. Veronica looked at me in surprise, but quickly pulled herself together. I'll contact them today. The owners, an older couple moving to Florida, agreed to my terms. A week later we signed the papers, and the house was mine. The move took another week. I did not hire professional movers. I decided leave most of the furniture in the apartment and sell it together with it in the new house. I took only the things dearest to my heart. Books, photos, a few antique items I got from my grandmother and my favorite bed. The rest I bought new. For the first time in my life, I could afford to choose furniture without looking at price tags. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling of freedom and all that time. Hugo never found out I'd moved. I hadn't returned his calls or texts, and Lucy, the only one who knew about my plans, had promised to keep it a secret. They'll be furious when he finds out. She warned me during one of our conversations. Let him. I shrugged. It's my life and my money. It's time. Hugo realized he can't control everything. Lucy helped me with the move, coming over every day after class. We unpacked boxes together, put books on shelves, hung pictures. It was a wonderful time. Toriali get to know my granddaughter, to see what kind of person she is. Do you like college? I asked her one day when we're sorting kitchen utensils. Not particularly, she admitted. Business administration isn't my thing, but my dad insisted. Said I could always get a job with a degree like that. What would you like to do? I took a set of old teacups out of the box. I don't know exactly. Lucy thought for a moment. I like writing and taking pictures and helping people. Journalism, maybe, or social work, or something art-related. You have time to figure it out. I smiled at her. The main thing is not to let others decide for you, even if those others are your parents. She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Lucy was only 19, and she was still dependent on her parents financially and emotionally. It's hard to go against their will in that position. You know, I said, setting the cups on the shelf, I could help. You pay for college if you decide to change your major. Really? Her eyes widened. You do that form? Sure, I nodded. What else is money for, if not to help the ones you love? Lucy hugged me tightly, and I felt tears come to my eyes. In that moment I realized I'd made the right decision. The money gave not only freedom, but also the opportunity to help my granddaughter find her way, something I had never had. When the move was complete, I decided to take my life seriously. I signed up for gardening classes at the local community center. I had always wanted to learn how to grow roses. I found a group for older people who met twice a week for board games and tea. I started attending morning yoga in the park. The instructor, a young woman named Tara, specialized in classes for seniors. Gradually, I made new acquaintances, almost friends. Margaret, a 79-year-old widow, a former librarian with a sharp mind and a rare sense of humor. Frank, 72, a former engineer who had a passion for growing orchids and chess. Elizabeth, 80, a former music teacher who still gave piano lessons to poor children. We would gather in my garden on Sundays, drinking tea or wine, discussing books, politics, local news. Sometimes we played cards or chess. Sometimes we just sat in silence, enjoying the peace in each other's company. I felt like I was finally living life to the fullest, the life I'd always wanted, but could never afford. And it felt wonderful. Hugo didn't find out about my move until a month later. Apparently he had finally gotten around to checking my old apartment and discovered that I had moved out. The new owners, a young couple with a young child, had given him my new address. Arrived unannounced on a Saturday morning. While I was working in the garden, I heard the sound of a car pulling up, looked up, and saw his black Audi at the gate. Hugo got out of the car and froze, looking at the house and garden. His face was a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and envy. Yes, envy. I suppose my modest house wasn't as impressive as the Maple Street mansion he dreamed of, but it was mine. All money, no credit, no debt, Mom. He came to the gate. Is this really your house? I straightened up, shook the earth off my gloves, and nodded. Yes, Hugo, this is my house. But how, when he was clearly confused? Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened? I went to the gate, but I didn't open it. Or would you have just started explaining why it was a bad idea? He sighed and ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood. It was what he always did when he was embarrassed or didn't know what to say. Can I come in? He asked at last. We need to talk. I hesitated, part of wanted to refuse him to slam the wicked in his face the way he'd slammed doors in my face. So many times, literally and figuratively. But the other part, the part that was still a mother despite everything, couldn't do that. Okay. I opened the gate. Come in, I'll make tea. We went into the house. Hugo looked around, with ill-concealed curiosity, noting the new furniture, the paintings on the walls, the fresh flowers and vases. It's cozy, he finally said when we sat down in the kitchen. Thank you. I put kettle on. I like it here. Did you sell the apartment? He asked bluntly. Yes, 2 weeks ago. I took out the cups, the same old ones with the blue pattern, to a young couple with a baby. They're very nice. How much did you get for? Hugo was never very tactful when it came to money enough. I wasn't about to tell him my financial affairs. I just wondered. He tried to smile, but it was unconvincing. I'm a realtor after all. Professional interest, of course. I nodded, pouring tea. Online professional. We talked for a while. Hugo was obviously uncomfortable, not knowing how to start a conversation. I wasn't going to help him, Mom, he finally said. I wanted to apologize for that dinner, for everything that was said, especially about Peter. He shouldn't have said those things, but he did. I shrugged. And maybe it was for the best, at least now. I know exactly what you think of me. No, Mother, you don't. Hugo stepped forward. We don't think of you as Peter said. He just got angry, said something. Stupid, do you? I looked him straight in the eye. You didn't see me as a burden when you were planning to put me in a nursing home. Didn't see me as just a source of money for your new home. Hugo looked away, and that was more eloquent than any answer. Thought it would be best for everyone, he muttered. Son, Terraces is a good place. It has everything you need. Hugo, I interrupted him. Let's be honest, Yao wanted the money from the sale of my apartment, that's it. You don't have to justify your concern. For me? He wasn't, staring into his cup. Then he looked up, his eyes a mixture of shame and stubbornness. Okay, Mom. Yes, we need money. We wanted to buy a house, but that doesn't mean we don't care about you. That's a strange way to show concern. It shook my head, sending me to live out my days among strangers, taking my money and using it for your own pleasure. Mom, please. Hugo sighed. I've come to make peace. We all miss you. Diane asks when you're coming over for dinner. Lucy talks about you all the time. Even Peter's been asking where you are. Really? I raised an eyebrow. And what exactly did he ask? Hugo hesitated. Well, he wanted to know where AO were and what was wrong with you. And he also wanted to know what happened to my money, right? I smiled, seeing his face change. Don't lie to me. Hugo, I know you too well. Okay. He sighed. Yes, Peter asked about the money, but that doesn't mean we're not worried about you. I believe Lucy is worried. I said softly. She visits me, often help me with the move. We talk a lot. Lucy came here. Hugo frowned. She didn't say anything because I asked her not to. I sipped my tea. I wanted to settle in first before I confronted you and your concerns. What concerns? That I can't do this on my own, that I need help, that I'm too old to live on my own. I listed all the arguments he must have prepared, that I should think about the future and how to manage my money. Hugo blushed. I've hit the mark, Mum. I'm just worried about you. He said finally, you're 77, living alone in a house this big. This house is smaller than my old apartment, I said. And it doesn't have the stairs you were so worried about. 1 floor wide. Doorways, non-slip bathroom floor. I've thought of everything, Hugo. But still he wouldn't give up. What if you get sick? Awful. Who's going to take care of you? I have a panic button. I pointed to a smell device on my wrist. 1 press and medical help will come. I'm not helpless. Hugo, Andy have friends who check on me every day. Friends? He looked surprised. What friends? New friends? I smiled. Margaret, Frank, Elizabeth. We go to yoga together, play chess, discuss books. This Wednesday we're going to a concert in the park, and next Sunday we're having a picnic here in Negaden. Hugo looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe perhaps he had never seen me as a person with my own desires, interests, abilities. To him, I had always been just a figure with certain functions, not a living person. I didn't know, he said quietly. I thought You were lonely, I was lonely, Hugo. I nodded for a very long time. But that's all changed. Now we were excellent again, Hugo. Finished his tea and set the cup on the table. Mum, he said uncertainly, I know you're angry with us, and you have a right to be, but we're still a family, and we'd like you to be a part of our lives. On what terms? Hugo, I asked you straight up, what do you want from me? He sighed clearly, not expecting such a question. Just be our mom and grandma to come over for family dinners, see? The grandkids, that's it. I raised an eyebrow, nothing more. Hugo lowered his eyes. Well, we still want to buy that house. We've put down a deposit, but we don't have enough for a down payment. The bank wants 200. Zero, and we only have 120. I was thinking maybe you could help us a loan, of course. We could pay it back with interest. That's it. The real reason for his visit, not caring, not wanting to reconnect. Money, always just money, Hugo. I sighed. You're making more money than Thanavir. Diane works too. You have a new car, a country club membership, a vacation in the Maldives. And you're asking me for money. His eyes widened. Did Lucy tell you? Does it matter? I shook my head. What matters is that you're lying to me again. You're pretending that you're having financial difficulty, Shin. Really, you just don't want to spend your money, Mom. It's not that simple. Hugo began to justify himself. We have obligations. Expenseverian has expenses. I interrupted him. But most people live within their means. See if you can't afford a $500 zero house, buy a $300,000 house, or keep saving, or stop spending money on country clubs and exotic vacations. But you don't need that money anyway. He suddenly blurted out. You have plenty. You've bought a house, you furnished it, you've probably got plenty left over, and we're your family. Who else are you going to leave it to? I looked at my son and saw a little boy who always wanted more toys, more sweets, more attention, who was never satisfied with what he had. Hugo, I said calmly, I'm not giving you money for a house, not as a loan, not as a gift. But why not? He looked genuinely puzzled. You were going to buy us a house. You said so yourself at dinner. Yes, I was. I nodded before I found out you were planning to put me in a nursing home. Before your son called me old and useless, before you lied to me about your financial situation. Now I have other plans for that money. What plans? Hugo frowned. What are you going to do with it? Live, Hugo. I smiled. Travel, help those who are truly in need. Maybe start a scholarship for students from low-income families, or support an animal shelter, or just enjoy life while I have it. But that's not fair. He jumped up, knocking over his cup. That money should stay in the family. It should help your grandchildren. Your son, my grandchildren. I will help, I said firmly. Lucy wants to change her major in college, and I'll pay her tuition. I'll help Peter too if he really needs it. But you, Hugo, I'm not giving you a dime for this house. You earn enough to provide for yourself. He stood with his fist clenched, and I could see anger and calculation struggling in him. Anger pushed him toward scandal, toward accusations, perhaps even threats. Calculation suggested that such behavior would only push me away permanently. And then he'd get nothing. Calculus won out. You understand, he said finally, taking a deep breath. You have the right to use your money as you see fit. I was just thinking, never mind. He sank back into his chair and began wiping up the spilled tea with a napkin. I'm sorry about the mess. It's okay. I got up and fetched a rag. It's just tea. Cleaned up the puddle in silence. Hugo looked depressed, but I knew it wasn't because of the tea, or even my refusal to owe him money. He was worried about losing control over me, over the situation, over the future. Hugo. I sat down across from him. I'm not giving up on you or my family. I just want our relationship to be based on honesty and respect, not money. I understand. He nodded, not looking at me. You could always come a visit, I continued, with Diane, with the kids or alone. We can spend time together, talking, getting to know each other again, but without manipulation, without lies, and without expecting me to solve our financial problems. Yes, Mom. He finally looked up. I'll do my best. He wasn't sure he really understood. Maybe he was just saying what I wanted to hear, hoping to change my mind in time. but it was at least a step in the right direction. Okay, I smiled. Come the Sunday lunch in a week, you'll meet some of my friends' friends. He looked unsure. I don't know you'll like Frank. I said he's into real estate too. He collects old maps of the city and knows the history of every significant building in South Burlington. Hugo nodded, still hesitant. All right. I'll come over next Sunday. Great. I stood up, signaling that the visit was over. Real. Be waiting about 2 hours. He got up too and headed for the door. At the threshold, he stopped and turned to Memem. I'm glad you're okay. I really am, thank you. Hugo, I smiled softly. I'm really doing well for the first time in a long time. He hugged me awkwardly, quickly, formally, as always. Then he went out and got into the car. I stood at the window watching his Audi drive out the gate and disappear around the corner. I don't know if he'll be here next Sunday. I don't know if we'll ever be able to build the kind of relationship I was talking about. Honest, respectful, no manipulation. Maybe too much water has passed, perhaps. We are two different people with different values. But I left the door open, and that's all I could do. I went out into the garden and continued my work with the roses, which was interrupted by Hugo's visit. The sun warmed my shoulders, and a light breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's fence. Somewhere in their backyard, a bird sang. This was my home, my life, my choice.